37-year-old Cari Farver was the kind of person who just commanded attention the moment she entered a room. Her laugh was absolutely infectious, and she had a smile that instantly made people feel welcome. She just lit up a room. Her friend, Amy Long, would later recall, "You just couldn't help but notice her." By trade, she was a computer programmer, fluent in a dozen different programming languages. She had earned her associate's degree from Iowa Western Community College, and by 2012, she'd landed her dream job as a programmer analyst at West Corporation in Omaha. She made the hour-long commute each way from her home in Macedonia, Iowa, a tiny town with a population of just 400. But Cari's absolute pride and joy was her son, Maxwell. In 2012, Max was 14 years old, and Cari made it a point to never miss his sports games or band concerts. She was a completely devoted mother. She'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in her late 20s, but by 2012, with the help of medication, she was stable and absolutely thriving. Cari had 3 distinct tattoos: an Aztec sun on her upper back, a yin-yang symbol paired with a Chinese character on her thigh, and on her left foot, another Chinese symbol. This last one meant mother. In the spring of 2012, Dave Cooper was looking for a fresh start. The 35-year-old auto mechanic had just recently separated from his long-term girlfriend, Amy Flora, the mother of his 2 children. After years in a committed relationship, he had moved to Omaha and taken a job managing an auto repair shop. He was very upfront about what he wanted at this point in his life. He wasn't looking for anything serious. So, he signed up for Plenty of Fish, a dating site, and made his intentions crystal clear to every woman he met. That spring, he began casually seeing someone he'd connected with on the site. Her name was Shanna Elizabeth Golia, but she went by Liz. She was a 37-year-old single mom of 2 who ran her own house cleaning business. Right from the start, Dave was honest with Liz, telling her he was seeing other people and wasn't looking for a commitment. Liz claimed she was perfectly fine with that arrangement, but deep down, she wanted something permanent. She became possessive, constantly calling and texting Dave, clearly jealous of any attention he gave to others. Then, in October of 2012, a woman walked into Dave's auto repair shop, needing some work done on her Ford Explorer, and Dave couldn't help but notice her. He thought she was gorgeous. There was an immediate spark between them, but since he was at work representing his company, he felt it wasn't his place to make a move. But then, weeks later, he stumbled across that same woman's profile on Plenty of Fish. Her name was Cari Farver. He reached out immediately, and their first date was on October 29th, 2012. They hit it off at a restaurant in Omaha. Dave later recalled that they were completely captivated by each other, but throughout the date, his phone kept blowing up with calls and texts from Liz. Dave, however, made his preference for Cari perfectly clear. After dinner, the 2 of them went back to Dave's apartment, and that's when Liz suddenly showed up at his door, claiming she just needed to pick up some things she'd left behind. In the hallway, the 2 women passed each other. It was a fleeting 10-second encounter, that's all. Cari didn't seem to think much of it. But for Liz Golia, that brief moment in the hallway sealed Cari Farver's fate. Over the next couple of weeks, Cari and Dave kept seeing each other. Since her job was close to his apartment, they were able to meet up pretty regularly. Neither one was looking for anything serious, but they both felt the potential for something more. In fact, Dave found himself rethinking his whole no-commitment rule when it came to Cari. There was just something different about her. He later said he could see a long-term future with her. Then, on November 9th and 10th, Cari's Ford Explorer was vandalized back at her home in Macedonia. Phone records would eventually reveal that Liz had made 6 calls to Cari's house, using *67 to block her number. On November 12th, Cari asked Dave if she could crash at his apartment for the week. She was swamped with a big project at work and didn't want to face the hour-long drive home every night. Dave was happy to have her, so She arranged for Max to stay with her mother, Nancy Rainey, for the week. Then came the morning of November 13th, 2012. At around 7 a.m., Dave kissed Cari goodbye and left for work. Cari was already awake and on her laptop, getting ready for the full day she had ahead of her at West Corporation. That would be the last time anyone ever saw Cari Farver alive. Because later that morning, around 11 a.m., Dave got a text message from Cari's phone. The message was bizarre. She was asking if they should move in together. Dave was completely blindsided. They had only been dating for 2 weeks. He sent a polite text back, turning her down. Almost instantly, his phone lit up with another text. Fine. Dave was completely baffled by the sudden, dramatic shift in tone. The confusion only deepened when he got home from work that evening to find that every single one of Cari's belongings had vanished from his apartment. Absolutely everything was gone. Her clothes, her laptop, all of her personal items. It was as if she had never even been there. Then, 2 days later, on November 15th, a text message was sent to Cari's employer at West Corporation, announcing that she was quitting her job. Strangely, the message also recommended a woman named Shana Golia as her replacement, and sure enough, that very same day, Liz Golia submitted an application for Cari's position. In the days that followed, the messages from Cari's phone escalated at an alarming rate, turning sinister with texts like, "My favorite thing to do is stand outside and just stare at you, and I hate you so much I want to put something sharp right through your heart." The texts were eerily specific, describing exactly what Dave was wearing and what he was doing at any given moment, sometimes even including photos and videos of him. "How's that coffee taste?" one message taunted while he was sitting in a diner. It was on November 16th that a worried Nancy Rainey officially reported her daughter missing to the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Nancy knew in her gut that something was terribly wrong. This was completely unlike her daughter, Cari. She explained to the officers that while Cari had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, she was managing it. In fact, she was stable on her medication. Nancy insisted she was not the kind of person who would just abandon her son, her job, and her entire life. But the police brushed off Nancy's concerns almost immediately. Their theory was that Cari had simply gone off her medication and decided to disappear on her own. It was a common occurrence, they claimed. But Nancy was adamant that something was wrong, pointing out that the texts she was getting from Cari's phone were completely out of character. For one, Cari was always meticulous about her grammar and punctuation, but these messages were riddled with sloppy errors. The tone was mean-spirited and hateful, a complete departure from the daughter she knew. Desperate, Nancy begged in text after text just to hear her daughter's voice, but the calls never came. Meanwhile, her son Max, who had just turned 15, tried to confirm it was really his mother by contacting her on Facebook. He sent 3 security questions, things that only she would know the answers to. There was no reply. He kept waiting for his mom to show up and get him, just like she always did. Just as the texts had promised, she never arrived. Thanksgiving came and went with no sign of her. Then Cari's birthday passed, then Max's. And in December of 2012, tragedy struck again when Nancy's husband, Dennis, passed away. Cari didn't show up for the funeral. For Nancy, this was the final straw. It was absolutely unthinkable that her daughter would miss such a critical family event. She knew then that something was desperately wrong. Then, in January of 2013, Dave made a startling discovery. He spotted Cari's Ford Explorer parked in a lot right near his apartment. He recognized it instantly after all. He had done work on it himself. He quickly snapped a photo of the license plate and sent it over to the Omaha police. When officers processed the vehicle, they found only a single, unidentified fingerprint on a container of mints. It wasn't a match for Cari, nor did it hit on anyone in the FBI's national database at the time. Several months later, investigators finally performed a data dump on the cell phones belonging to both Dave and Liz. But in a critical failure, they never actually analyzed that data. The potential evidence just sat there, unexamined, for years. Had that data been analyzed right away, the case might have been solved years sooner. Instead, the campaign of harassment was only getting worse. Dave was forced to change his phone number multiple times, but it didn't matter. The messages kept coming through. He later said he was on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown, unable to ever truly relax. He could never let his guard down and was constantly looking over his shoulder. The texts now included threats against his children and contained terrifyingly specific details about his private life. Liz was also getting messages, supposedly from Cari. And then, in August of 2013, the harassment escalated from digital threats to real-world violence. Liz's house was set on fire. All 4 of her pets were found dead, 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake. Then emails started pouring in, supposedly from Cari, taking credit for the fire. In January of 2014, Dave's gun was stolen from his apartment, and then a brick came crashing through his window, while he was there with another woman. The harassment also spread to Amy Flora, Dave's ex-girlfriend, and the mother of his kids, who started receiving threatening messages. By this point, years had passed, marked by an onslaught of 15,000 emails, and somewhere between 25,000 and 50,000 text messages. It was basically a full-time job, taking up 40 to 50 hours a week, just to torment the lives of everyone involved. Between 20 and 30 fake email accounts were set up, all using variations of Cari's name. In total, over 60 email accounts were involved before the case was finally shelved as a cold case. Cari Farver had been missing for more than 2 years. Her bank accounts showed zero activity, no transactions, no withdrawals, absolutely nothing. The case just sat there, filed away as a missing persons report with no active investigation underway. And all this time, Cari Farver's reputation in Macedonia was being systematically destroyed. The small town was convinced she was a dangerous stalker who had up and abandoned her own son. The gossip and judgment dragged on for years. Nancy kept receiving cryptic messages from social media accounts, supposedly from her daughter, telling her to stop looking for her. The family had to get through one holiday after another without Cari. Nancy never lost hope. But as the months bled into years, it got harder and harder to believe they would ever see her again. For Dave, life had become a living nightmare. He was living in a constant state of fear. The harassment was non-stop, and the messages were absolutely relentless, always watching, always threatening. He'd gained 30 pounds and was drinking heavily every single night just to cope with the stress. And Liz, who he'd been seeing on and off, was always right there, acting supportive, and even receiving her own messages from the woman they all believed was Cari. In the spring of 2015, Sergeant Jim Doty and Deputy Ryan Avis from the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office volunteered to take another look at the cold case. They had talked about Cari's disappearance from time to time around the office, and something about it just didn't sit right with them. Doty and Avis decided to tackle it from 2 different angles. Avis worked to prove Cari was still alive, while Doty worked to prove she was dead. Right away, Avis recognized something absolutely critical. It's just not normal for an adult to completely fall off the map and not spend a single dime, he said. Cari's bank accounts had been completely untouched for over 2 years. In May of 2015, the investigators sat down with Nancy Rainey, who was the first person in authority to actually take her concerns seriously. Nancy gave them a key piece of evidence: a photo of a $5,000 check, supposedly from Cari to pay for furniture. The check was conspicuously signed with the name Shanna Golia. This was the first solid link between the 2 women, who were supposed to be complete strangers. That's when they brought in Special Deputy Anthony Carver, the digital forensics administrator for the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office. Carver had originally volunteered for the position for just $1 a year, before being hired on full-time. He would end up dedicating approximately 3,000 hours to this case, even putting off his own brain surgery, to continue working the investigation. Carver started by digging into the 2013 phone downloads that had never been properly examined. Right out of the gate, Tony was able to show us that Liz was the one posing as Cari, Doty would later recall, but the evidence still didn't tell them what actually happened to Cari, or where she'd been between 2012 and 2015. Liz had done a remarkably good job of covering her digital tracks. By the time we got the case, Liz had learned how to get better and better at hiding her tracks. Farver explained. For example, she was using a website that let her schedule emails and text messages to be sent on a specific day and time. When she was with Dave, they would both get messages from Cari at the exact same time. He never suspected the woman sitting right beside him was the one behind them all. Farver also uncovered that Liz had created over 24 fake email accounts, every single one using some variation of Cari's name. He then found photos on Liz's phone, snapped about 1 month before police ever recovered Cari's vehicle. This meant Liz knew the car's location long before law enforcement. To sift through the evidence, Farver even developed custom software to analyze the terabytes of data. He meticulously scanned metadata and deleted files, managing to trace an IP address right back to a place where Liz was actually laying her head. It was like finding the proverbial needle in a haystack, he said. But he did it. Thousands of threatening emails were then traced, directly back to Liz's various residences, including the very house that had later burned to the ground. Investigators also finally got a match on that mysterious fingerprint. Found in Cari's car, way back in 2013, it belonged to Liz Goliar. Then, on December 4th, 2015, Liz boldly walked into the sheriff's office on her own. She filed a harassment complaint against Amy Flora and voluntarily let investigators download the entire contents of her phone. This was the second time they'd done this, but now they knew exactly what to look for. The very next day, Liz shot herself in the thigh at Big Lake Park. Her story? That Flora had attacked her with Dave's stolen 9mm Smith & Wesson. The timing was a little too convenient. She had just reported that very gun missing the day before. Cops immediately suspected the wound was self-inflicted, with unmated, but the investigators played along, pretending to believe Liz's story. They asked for her help to catch Flora, telling her they needed incriminating evidence, and Liz took the bait. Over the next year, from December 2015 through 2016, Liz sent 13 emails, all supposedly from Flora, confessing to Cari's murder. These emails were filled with details only the real killer could know. They described Cari being stabbed 3 or 4 times, and that the attack happened inside her own vehicle, that her body had been wrapped up and burned, then disposed of in trash bags. And then came the crucial detail. The emails mentioned a yin-yang tattoo on Cari's left hip. This was a detail that had never been released to the public. It was a matching tattoo Cari had gotten with her ex-husband back in 2009. Only someone who had actually seen Cari's body would know it was there. Investigators traced all 13 of those confession emails straight back to Liz's own devices. They had all the evidence they needed for an arrest, but they were still missing a body. They still didn't have their smoking gun. Then, in 2016, Dave remembered something. He had an old tablet he'd owned since way back in 2012. Liz had used it and had access to it during their relationship. He handed it over to investigators in February of 2017. Farver began sifting through thousands of deleted thumbnail images on a micro SD memory card that was inside the tablet. That same card had also been in Liz's phone right around the time of Cari's disappearance, and that's when he found it. A photo of a deceased person's foot. On the top of that foot was a tattoo of a Chinese character. Nancy confirmed it was the exact same tattoo that was on Cari's left foot, the symbol for mother. A medical examiner confirmed the foot belonged to a deceased individual. There was also another photo, this time of a deceased person's thigh. It made me realize that Liz Goliar killed Cari Farver, and she's taking photos of her body, Farver stated. Prosecutors would later describe these images as trophy pictures that memorialized her heinous acts, as if it were some kind of sick accomplishment. With this new lead, investigators conducted a third search of Cari's vehicle. This time, they stripped the seat fabric completely off. Deep inside the passenger seat foam, they found Cari's blood. DNA analysis confirmed the chances of it being anyone else's blood were 1 in 100 billion. They finally had their smoking gun. On December 22, 2016, more than 4 long years after Cari's murder, Liz Golier was arrested at her home in Persia, Iowa. She was charged with first-degree murder and second-degree arson. Her bail was set at a staggering $5 million. Just 1 month later, Liz waived her right to a trial by jury. Her defense attorney would later explain why. "We waived a jury trial to fast-track the case, hoping for a conviction before a body ever turned up." He called it a calculated risk that was destined to backfire spectacularly. The trial began on May 10, 2017, and ran for 10 days. Digital forensics expert Anthony Carver was on the stand for 3 of them. Dave Cooper testified, reading just a small fraction of the 12,000 emails he'd received. Nancy Rainey took the stand to speak about her daughter's tattoos and the messages. The defense called no witnesses, hinging their entire case on the fact that there was no body, no weapon, and no eyewitnesses. But the prosecution had built a mountain of evidence, detailing how she spent years tormenting multiple lives, spinning a web of lies to keep the illusion of Cari alive. All of it was done so she wouldn't get caught, prosecutor Brenda Beadle argued. 14 days later, at 9 in the morning, Judge Timothy Burns delivered his verdict, stating, "Cari Farver did not voluntarily disappear and drop off the face of the earth." He continued, "Very sadly, she was murdered." The court finds beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant intentionally killed Cari Farver, with deliberate and premeditated malice, guilty on both counts, first-degree murder and second-degree arson. The courtroom erupted into loud cheers and applause as Nancy Rainey burst into tears. "She's got her name back," Nancy said. "It's not tarnished. She loved life. I just wish she could have had more of it." Liz Golier was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 18 to 20 years for the arson. Cari's body has never been recovered. Her son, Maxwell, went on to graduate from Iowa State University in 2021 with a degree in software engineering. Today, he works as an application developer, honoring his mother's legacy in the world of technology. In May of 2019, the 3 investigators established the Cari Farver Memorial Scholarship Fund, supporting students in information technology at Iowa Western Community College. The fund provides $2,000 annual scholarships and has for nearly 4 years. The world was led to believe Cari Farver was a dangerous stalker, but the truth was the complete opposite. She finally has her name back, and her legacy lives on.